can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Mark Patchett of Growth.shop. And before I formally introduce you, Mark, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out of the podcast. And since Mark is a thriving, growing agency, some of the other ones I've had on, David Hernandez, Lotus 823, talks about influencer marketing and their strategy to get brands in front of ideal customers. So this relates to this episode as well. And Robert Dodd and Joe Solano, they're co-founders of XL Technologies. They've been doing the digital agency thing for over 20 years. What's cool about them, and they specialize in real estate brokers and help people scale their brokerages, but they grew and built up a SaaS company within their agency, which is kind of interesting to hear how they did it. And then, of course, Jason Swank. I had 2 episodes with him, how he built up his 8-figure agency and sold it, and then what they're looking for in acquiring agencies these days. And that's actually how Mark and I met. So shout out to Jason. Thank you. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships. And how do we do that? We help you run your podcast. We're an easy button for you to launch and run your podcast. We do accountability, the strategy, and all the execution around it. You know, for me, Mark, we know each other a little bit. The number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire on this planet and profile them. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com. And I'm excited to introduce Mark Patchett. He's founder of Growth.shop, and he's been in the D2C trenches for over a decade, building brands like Victoria Beckham Beauty, Nectar Sleep. They grew from 10 million to 240 million in 18 months, plus hundreds and hundreds of other brands. And he's gonna break down how his thought process, what they've done. And Growth Shop was built to provide brands that have product market fit, access to the firepower of a team that can help grow it even more. So they're currently based in Dubai after departing from their home in the Ukraine, and the team has headquarters in London. And Mark, thanks for joining me.
Good to be here, man. Absolute pleasure.
So just talk for a second about Growth Shop and what you do.
Growth Shop. So we do a bunch of stuff. You summarized it really well. The main bit is partnering with consumer brands that are doing about 2 to 5 million a year that have really, really good product market fit. And we normally see strong founder-led companies that have had exposure to a particular kind of market. And they're like, shit, I just know there's a better way at doing this. They've gone away and they've created the product. They understand the product development. They understand the customers. And that's usually enough to get a business to the 2 to 5 million level. Like, even if you've got basic kind of Facebook ads, you can get there. Getting from 5 to 10 and then up to the couple 100 million level, it requires a bit of a different skill set and really, really deeply understanding the whole growth ecosystem. So we built those big brands like at Nectar Sleep hitting 240 million. And then, we left there at the 333 kind of level. And then we took that team we built, fully integrated growth team. And then we partner with those brands and run a couple in parallel.
So a brand comes to you. I'm curious of what they are doing currently. Are they doing some version of paid advertising? And then what are the services that you're working with them on?
They're always doing paid marketing. Like that's our jet fuel. That's how we build these brands really, really quickly. They're usually doing an okay job. Sometimes they've got like a mid-level person managing it inside. Most of the time they've got an agency. And largely what we see, like we do a whole audit of these companies, and it's a similar type of audit you'd use if you're trying to understand the valuation of a company, which is always a nice way to look at it. It's not just talking about Facebook ads, but ultimately talking about exit valuations. And the numbers are just kind of flat. And the numbers are flat because like a typical agency is just looking within the Facebook platform, they're recycling some ads and they're just kind of coasting. And it's like a safe zone. So to push and to really go quickly, you've got to get quite aggressive. So we cover all the media buying piece, but then we have a fully integrated creative solution. So we extract UGC. Usually they do their own shoots. We help them guide it. Then we have a whole data platform in the back end that sucks all of that data and gives a one unified view, which is dollar in, dollar out. Like we don't care what Facebook says. We don't care what Google says. We care how much money you're getting and how much money you're spending. So we plug that in. And then the layer within that as well is all CRM. So it's kind of really powerful email automation, SMS automation, referral, all those types of bits.
Mark, you looked under the hood of a lot of different brands and companies. I'm curious, when you take them through the audit, what are some of the most common or biggest mistakes that you see the companies making?
Yeah, good question. There's always quite a few. So a lot of the time it's been not understanding what attribution looks like across different platforms. So someone often will say, we don't think Facebook's working. You know, we want to be making $3 for every dollar we're spending, but we're only making $2. But then you realize that Facebook used to do a good job at capturing all this, but a lot of this time now it's missing it. So when you look at the blended metrics of the company, maybe they're at $4 for every dollar. So we help them understand that Facebook might be doing more than they think. So we actually accelerate, well, we'd help them model it out. And we'd say, look, let's test. What happens if we increase the budget by 50%? You're still looking at that number, which you don't think is necessarily good enough, but let's look at how much money you're actually making. So that's a major thing. Then there's always just like housekeeping-y bits, like people neglecting the importance of conversion rate optimization and things like keeping really powerful, fresh reviews top of mind. So lots of those types of housekeeping-y bits, but a lot of it comes down to understanding attribution problems.
Talk a little bit more about that, neglecting conversion rate optimization. Obviously, you're driving traffic to websites and pages, and that's a big component. I mean, you could do your job and drive lots of people there, and then they're not converting. So what have you seen when they neglect conversion rate? What are the mistakes they're making there?
A lot of the time you can find out from just asking what their site refresh rate has been, what their CRO testing roadmap looks like. And the really powerful thing that we help people understand is that we're like, all right, you want to double your business? I'm like, well, how would you go about and do that? How would you go about doing that? And they're like, oh, we increase the budgets. I'm like, well, what if I told you you could double your business without spending another cent? Like, all right, tell me more. And what's cool about it is that you only need to increase like 3 of the 4 main growth levers by 26% each to double a business. So if you increase the conversion rate by 26%, you increase the average order value by 26%, and you increase the repeat rate or lifetime value by 26%. None of those need more money. None of those need more traffic, and you can double your business. So we like to execute on those different areas and then increase budget in parallel. But the types of things that are really common that people are neglecting with CRO is assuming that people understand their brand as well as they do. So we like to use like a sense check called the reverse elevator pitch, which is that before someone even scrolls below the folds, say they're landing on the homepage, in about 5 seconds or so, someone should be able to tell you exactly what you do uniquely. That's it, as quick as that. And most sites don't pass this test. Don't say. They're like, well, we say all that shit like, down below. Just check it out. It's in the Our Story page. I'm like, 80% of people aren't going to scroll below the fold. 80%. So you got to nail it there. So there's a lot of kind of easy things that are very powerful like that.
Mark, I don't know, from my research, it shows I don't think you've written a book, but I think you should. How would you double your business without spending more money? And you have 3 things. Well, there's 4 things, but 3 things without spending more money. And then the 4th is obviously the firepower, right? Increasing the budget there. You mentioned the reviews, and I've seen you present a cool chart, which basically one of the things you do with your clients, I think, is you take all of the competitors' reviews and you run them through. I'm not sure exactly how your magic works, but you run them through and you actually see, you help that company find out their unique positioning in the market under different categories, right?
Yeah, it's so powerful, so powerful, and it's part of our like onboarding research piece. We love to do it, and it's like the easiest hack as a marketer. So you could go away for like a week brainstorm session that costs $50,000. It's like, who are we? Who are we as a brand? But it's like the people that define who you are as a brand are your customers. Like you can guide them. So the process starts with review exports and review scraping. So what all people need to do is export all of your reviews, find 2 to 3 competitors, and usually do it on like the primary product, and then get those reviews scraped. So you can get someone on Upwork to do this for $80. And then what you do in the most basic form is to do things like run word cloud analysis. So it just extracts the most common themes. And what we're looking for is positive reviews and then negative reviews. And what you're trying to get as an outcome is, how you talk about your brand and how you think about your brand. What are your customers actually talking about? What's really resonating with them? And there's often things that really, really stand out that you're not even talking about. So then what you want to do is you want to do the same thing with your competitors to then find out, where are we really strong? What are customers loving about us and then hating about our competitors? And what are our competitors doing really well that we might not be doing such a good job at? And it really works well. So like at Nectar, we ran the same thing, and we found out that all people talked about was comfort, but people talked about comfort for all of our competitors. We had a 365 night trial versus they had 100. People just obsessed over that. We're doing an okay job at that. But then people really liked our logistic experience versus they didn't like it for our competitors. So straight away, we know that people are going to look at 3 brands. So we start trying to find these like trigger points, like kind of twisting the blade a little bit on the competitors. And it works phenomenally.
Yeah, I love it. I think I saw with Nectar specifically, some of the competitors were spending, I don't know, lots and lots of money on their ads and their creative and everything. And you talked about how you spent $300 and helped them drive that into 10 million.
Yeah, it was like a beautiful shitty ad. It's like, yeah, Casper had raised 380 million. Purple were killing it with their YouTube ads. And it's kind of like how ugly websites work sometimes, because there's a lot of hypotheses around it, and sometimes it communicates value. Like if you go into like a basic hotel, it's a basic hotel. But this ad, we were kind of one of the first people to use like user generated content. So instead of having these big budget productions, we're like, we don't have the money to do that. So what else can we do? Well, we can do this. And then the concept around that ad all came from that review scraping process. So instead of doing these big, expensive kind of consulting activities, we were just like, oh, let's find out what people actually give a shit about. Then let's get real people talking about it at the end.
So
it works well.
Talk about how the audit process works. So when a company, if they first want to engage with you, you would charge them for an audit, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So how does the audit process work?
So the audit process has a few different bits, and it depends on the size of the company and the amount of data we've got. So like in the most basic form, it's plugging into their e-commerce platform. So something like Shopify and extracting out net sales and looking at things like refund rates. Then it's taking all of the data from the marketing platforms that they're using, whether it's Google Ads, TikTok, Meta. Then we mush it all together to run a historical analysis to see how that business has been going month over month for the last 2 years or so, or whatever period's relevant. And then we use forms of marketing mix modeling to try and understand patterns. So often we'll find out it's like, hey, this channel is actually doing way more for you guys. You should have been doubling down. Or this channel flatlined. And then we'll analyze the creative. We'll look at the amount of time people spend looking at the creative. We'll look at the percentage of people that will stop in the feeds. So we kind of start with this holistic view, like you'd see in a P&L for the company overall. And then we drill down to try and find some easy opportunities.
What brands, Mark, right now are you paying attention to that when you see, you think they should definitely be working with you?
It's any of the guys in like the beauty space, or any type of brand that has an LTV component. Because what we're going to find this year is that paid media is going to start getting really hard. The brands that are going to do well are the ones that can obsess over extracting more from their existing customer list by just new product development or improvements in CRM. So any brands that have a natural type of LTV component to them.
So do any stick out to you that you're following?
Yeah, well, there's a lot we're looking at in the beauty space. Yeah, there's quite a few. There's quite a few.
How did you get into this?
I got into this. I got a library book when I was 15 or so, which was building websites for dummies. And I was like, all right, I'm going to tinker around with this. And then I built a website using Dreamweaver, which was just like a painstaking process. Like you think you're getting it right, and then you launch it, and then something's broken. You go back and forward. But then I finished the site. I'm like, great. I'm just going to grab the cat. And I was like, all right, now I got this website. I'm like, how the hell do I get people to the website? So I Googled how to get people to website. I'm like, all right, SEO. All right, I got to learn how to write some articles and get some backlinks. Then I started getting some people to the site. And I'm like, all right, now I got these people. How the hell do I make money from this thing? How to make money online. Then got stuck into the affiliate world. And then I'm like, all right, I got these people. I'm making some money. How do I get them to spend more money? I'm like, conversion rate optimization. So I kind of just went in this journey, and then would launch new brands, work out what I didn't know, work for a company with people top of their game, kind of learn some more, add some value there. And then the cycle goes on and on and on.
Mark, there's three things I want to ask about, which I know you think deeply about. And the first is positioning. Market's crowded. You mentioned with Nectar. I mean, there's competitors in every industry, right? So how do you think about positioning?
It's a tricky beast. We have the advantage that we've done it before and built companies, which if you've only, like most kind of performance agencies may just do like Facebook. They may do some ad creative because they kind of need it. But then, and you can think it's the be all and end all. Like I remember when I did that, I'm like, yeah, I know my shit. I'm the king of Google, blah, blah, blah. And then you go and work inside one of these companies or launch your own. And it's just a fraction of it. It's like the reality of building these brands and making them successful is negotiating 30-day, 45-day net payment terms with suppliers, or it's negotiating that they can get a piece of equity in exchange for a massive reduction in COGS. So there's all these types of parts that are the true kind of defining factors of the really successful consumer brands. So the positioning that we like to bring is that we have in-depth knowledge of that side of the business. So we take that and we have like executive level discussions, not just talking about Facebook. It's like overall strategy, whether it's global expansion, like those types of things. And then we still have our toolkit below, but it's all based off a strategy that comes from understanding how to build really, really big brands overall.
You mentioned some growth levers with CRO, the order value, repeat value, and the last to put fuel is a lead generation piece. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about lead generation and putting that firepower on.
Yeah, so a lot of it kind of unlocks. It's almost like a role player game where you have to go through certain doors to unlock certain things. So for example, if you don't pass the reverse elevator pitch, it's really hard to scale paid media. Because if you haven't got that, it means you don't have the right pieces of creative. And if you don't have the right pieces of creative, it's really, really hard to scale kind of paid media. So the kind of reality of where it's at now is that like 80% of success on platforms like Meta is coming from the creative. And even now, with the way that Google is going, a lot of it's kind of mushing in rich media creative with the kind of standard text ads that you've got. So you've got to get really, really good at that. So adding the gas actually comes from getting all of that other stuff sorted first. And then the other kind of 20% is the technical media buying bit.
When you're evaluating the companies and seeing where should we put more effort and time, you're looking at a lot of the data. And you mentioned briefly earlier about a data platform. So how does that work with the brands that you help?
So with the brands that we help, we have a platform that we built, which extracts all of the data and then puts it into one unified view, which some brands get close with this. Like maybe they're using a tool like Triplewell or Hyros doesn't really complete the picture there, or they're doing it and built it in Tableau or Looker. It's hard to build this stuff and it's expensive. So we've solved that first problem by building all those integrations and then unifying it to give you kind of like an executive level view at any time. How's my business performing today? How was it last week? Yada, yada, yada. But the bit where it gets more powerful is looking at things like cumulative analysis. So like any business is going to have different pieces that contribute to an overall goal. So what we do is we have cumulative pacing, which looks at exactly how you're pacing versus your goal versus last year versus this month. And then it breaks it down with the same view over email, over Meta. So the idea is that you should be able to land on one page, then you should just scroll down a tiny bit and you could pinpoint, even if you didn't understand the technical things, and you can understand exactly why a business is performing well or not and where to focus energy next.
And then is that something that you share in a report, or do they see like a dashboard? What's it look like visually when you share it?
They get access straight into the mothership, which is another like accountability thing. So instead of just sending like a monthly report, which is like, well, Facebook says everything's really good, and they're like, yeah, but the business is looking like a piece of shit in the P&L. We don't hide behind anything like that. So we give them all direct access.
Nice. I want to give a little bit more detail on what you do. And we mentioned Nectar before. So can you just talk a little bit about just some of the steps when you first started working with them till, just, I guess, scaling up?
It was a really good bunch. So I initially I'd quit a marketing director role at a company called Truva, which we scaled to be kind of top 5 fastest growing in Europe. Really, really smart guys. And then met a guy called Scott McLeod, who's a genius. We call him Scotty Boy Genius. And he was like the linchpin at Nectar. Then there's the 3 other founders. So initially I was just helping out with some meta bits, and then kind of saw the potential. I was like, man, I want to do some more with these guys. And what was cool about that structure is that Casper had like a floor in New York City high rises, purple, massive office. Nectar, they were like, all right, let's just build out this team wherever we want, anywhere in the world. And I'd been living in Asia and a bunch of other countries and loved finding the best talent anywhere in the world. So they kind of essentially said, you guys do whatever you want, just grow this business, hire the right people, let's be smart about it, just go. So 0 red tape. And we were all really growthy guys. We weren't like ex-management consultants. We just loved to tinker and tinker and tinker. So things like that ad that did 10 million, they're the things that get turned around in a couple of days. No long meetings, no management meetings, just little Slack updates. And we just kind of hacked our way to it. And we just unlocked a little bit of a conversion rate improvement, not really an LTV bit, better ads, increased budget, and kind of just tinker and tinker and tinker. And you forget what the numbers are like. And then you log in and you get a reality check. And you're like, wow, we're spending like 10 million bucks a month. This is like a big thing. This is a big thing. So yeah, tinkering and freedom and just putting smart people in one virtual place and letting them do their job.
What, Mark, when you look back on that, what learnings did you have, maybe where you felt there were these key points where you unlocked something? What would be an example of a time when you're like, we unlocked this, now we're kind of on the next level?
I think a lot of it came down from really understanding your numbers. That was a huge bit. So it was the time when Facebook attribution was still good. So instead of obsessing over it, we built out like an automated way of doing it. And like we did this in Google Sheets. You know what I mean? Like basic shit, but it was all live and all updated that would extract real revenue, total media spend across everything. And our perspective was, if the business is looking good here, keep hammering it, keep spending, be aggressive, and just use the metrics within the platforms as kind of guiding principles. But we never obsessed over it too much as long as the business was working. So I think a big learning there was don't obsess over minutia. If you've got smart people that are executing on the right things and they've got freedom and then the overall numbers of the company are looking good, just keep hitting it. just keep hitting it.
You also worked with Idle Brands. Talk about what you did with them.
That was another mattress one, which was really interesting. And like the catalyst that really grew that one was a partnership with the United States Postal Service, which is an absolute beast. And the cool thing about the partnership they had, which is like I always say, God bless America, because they have these programs that not every country has. And then they allow you to extract like 16,000 leads a day. And the data point is that like 60% of people when they move buy a new mattress, like 60%. And we know that all of these people are moving. So it was a lead source that didn't require Facebook. It didn't require Google ads. It didn't require anything. Like those channels are working for us. But this thing was like a nitrous jet stream injected into the business. And it went from doing like $100,000 a month to 5.4 million a month in like 9 months. Absolute beast.
I would think that would break a business.
And it did, yes. And it did. And it was like the big learning there is that you can look at all the growth numbers and it can be fantastic. But I've always had this over Christmas time where we're hitting these unbelievable numbers. And then on the other way, we're the happiest people ever. And then you look at the poor customer service people and the poor operations people. They're like, they just see a tsunami coming at them. They're like, man, no, stop. We're like, we can't. We need our graph to look good.
Right. How do you prepare now companies for that trajectory, right? That maybe they're not used to that fast growth. What do you do? I don't know, maybe to warn the operations or customer support.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot we've done on the automation front with customer support. So there's really cool like AI tools that you can plug in, and even with like the open so like the new chat platforms that are coming out, they're insane. They're insane. They can help automate a lot of that. But like the most pain you're going to get is if you're just not shipping things in time because you can't keep up. Like the majority of customer service issues go away if your product is good and it gets shipped on time. So the big thing with operations was that this was the time of like the China's anti-dumping laws. That's what really hurt. So having domestic production as like an overflow, even if you're going to lose margin, but it means that you can ship things on time, is really, really handy. And then a lot of it comes down to the payment terms that you've got with your suppliers. So if you really want to be growing that quickly, you're going to see a lot of money coming in, but you're going to see even more money coming out if you've got to pay 60, 90 days up front.
How do you tell them to prep for production? Because, I'm not sure in the case of, there's a lot of different types of cycles, whether it's a mattress or a beauty product. If it takes a certain amount of time to actually make the product, it's hard. The inventory management seems like you said, a kind of a cash flow / preparing for growth. How do you tell them we want X number of months on hand for this campaign when they're maybe not used to that?
I think it depends on how sure you are of your growth rate. So like another common problem we see is that people, like the founders, have such a steadfast belief in how big their business can be that they'll often allocate, say they raise a bit of money, they'll allocate 80% of that to doing like a bulk inventory deal in exchange for getting a 20% reduction in margin. What can be a better approach is appreciating that maybe we won't hit those numbers yet, we will later. So it can often be better having lower margin in exchange for lower orders until you really, really validate that you can get it. And then in terms of like inventory pacing, that can be really tricky as well. I'd want to be sure, I have a very, very high degree of confidence that I can hit the numbers I'm going to hit based on historical data, not based on my gut feel. Even if it means you grow a little bit slower, you're going to have a much more stable business. And then you can ultimately be bigger and more stable.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of moving pieces with the supply chain. And we saw even during COVID, a lot of these break down, right? Supply chain, some of them shut down. So how did you manage that during, and whether it's COVID or something else, How did you see your clients manage that?
The ones with US production were largely okay. It was the ones that had things coming from China that got hammered. And with ones like that, the answer is, how was it managed? Just not that well. Like, brands just got cleaned out. Like, that's a really hard one to plan for. But the brands that weathered it were really honest with their customers, and were like, "Hey guys, this shit's happened. We don't even have a date for you yet, but we're going to work on it. And in exchange for doing that, we're going to do this." The ones that got really hammered are ones that just mismanaged communication, because people can be very, very reasonable as long as you just don't bullshit them. And people as in the customers.
Mark, I know from my research, team and culture is important to you. So I'd love to hear about, hiring and how you maintain culture. Because again, I think people are all over the world on your team.
Yeah, it's super, super important. So it's like we have 3 values, which is smarter, faster, happier. And the idea there is that you should be able to build really big things while getting better at it, while enjoying the process. Because I'd had some tough slogs working inside of like venture-backed companies, which once your goals are set by like VCs, they'll want you to hit the moon or just miss and die. Like that's kind of the business model. If they have 1 in 20 that's going to be a unicorn, they want to find out who that's going to be as quickly as possible. And it's kind of just a quick decision that gets pushed down. And then in the engine room, the people dealing with that are just burning out, like just getting absolutely slammed. So I wanted to make sure that when I built Grow Shop that we didn't do that. We didn't do that. So in terms of the hiring process, I do a lot of the first rounds still, because I can get a good sense as to someone's culture fit very quickly. And it's small things like asking about what they're reading, and a lot of it is just chit chat kind of bullshit for 15 minutes, just to see how curious someone is and to see how they've thought about solving problems in their lives, like whether they've got up and traveled and moved and the problems they've had there, how they've overcome them. That type of stuff's really important. And then we do a paid audit. So we'll give them access to some anonymized data, and it will vary based on the seniority of the role. But if they don't progress into a full-time role, then we'll pay them to thank them for their time, which works quite well. But then in terms of the people we look for entrepreneurial kind of people that will ultimately start their own business, which feels counterintuitive, but it's like I've left all the companies that I've left because I got capped. So instead, what we do is we hire people that we can train up and be phenomenal. And then if they want to launch something of their own, they can do it with the team that they've helped build, so they can ultimately become like a client, or we can invest in them.
Typically, what have you seen? Do people want to start a brand or e-commerce business?
You know what? A lot do, but then after they work with a bunch, they're like, it's way too hard. I don't want to do that anymore. Because with our side of it, like a lot of people have just managed Facebook ads and they're like, yeah, I scaled the shit out of that brand. I could do it. But then because we do so much, people get visibility into what it really takes. So a lot of people have wanted to, and then they're like, no chance.
Sometimes the grass is greener. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned books. I'd love to hear some of your favorites.
What?
Your favorite books.
Books.
Yeah.
So a few. Let me pull up from my Kindle. So a few that I really like is, it's like a bit of a mix. I like some wacky ones, like Bill Bryson's one of my favorite writers. Because to get my head like out of thinking business, I love travel and travel stories, and I like funny ones. So his depiction of traveling around Europe and then Australia and Africa, it's outstanding. And I like to be laughing and kind of joking around as it really opens up my brain. But then on the other side of things, when I like to read businessy types of books, The Almanac by Naval is unbelievable. And I like to read that or listen to that. like once every 6 months. And then there's also like wacky old ones. Like I like learning about things like cybernetic transposition and like goal setting and kind of setting visions, and realizing that so much of that came from like years and years and years ago. And then things like Simplify was really good. That was fantastic. And then I like books about science. So like The Science Delusion, that's fantastic. As it helps you, like when you're learning about atoms and molecules, it pulls you down to such like a deep layer that you see different patterns when you come back up.
Any favorites when it relates to goal setting? Any authors or books?
To goal setting? Yeah, I think cybernetic transposition is for sure one of my favorites, or As a Man Thinketh. Really, really good. Really powerful. And they all, you know what, they all kind of say the same shit. Like when it comes down to it. But it's reaffirming that, hey, if there's a lot of interesting people talking about a similar thing, there's got to be something there.
Yeah. I mean, you see patterns. You probably see patterns, same thing with the e-commerce, right? It's certain things work. You're seeing certain things work across a bunch of brands, and you start to see patterns.
Yeah, exactly, man. Exactly. And sometimes the brain needs a little bit of force feeding through repetition to kind of get it.
Yeah, I mentioned, Mark, you had to depart from the Ukraine. So
Yes.
what was that experience like?
A bit, yeah, a tough one. So we built out quite a big team there in Ukraine, who were just amazing, like some of the best people I've ever met. And then found the love of my life, and then the whole war thing started, and it was very weird. So we were away in Paris for the weekend for her birthday, kind of knowing that something was going to go down. And then a few days later, it all started. So then we were kind of actual refugees for 6-7 months. Or
You were
6
just
months
stranded
or so. And
there.
yeah, stranded. And it was weird because I kind of have an arrogance having like an Australian passport. Oh, I can go anywhere. But then like the visa clocks run out and you've got to keep moving around. And it was one of the first big years after COVID travel where people are more confident. So Airbnb prices are just insane. So we're just getting slammed from that point, and then having to move and then trying to stay focused and building the agency where you have to pick up and move every 3-4 weeks. Yeah, quite a weird experience.
I imagine your wife's family was there even though she was traveling outside the country.
Yeah, well, they were stuck because men can't leave if you're under 50 or so. So like her dad is awesome. They were stuck there, and then it's very tough for mum to leave because she's got cats and her life there. So it's like a Western perspective. It's like, oh, why don't you just leave? Like, it's not that easy to leave. Like, where are you going to go? How are you going to take your stuff? And it's like a 35-hour train to get out. Yeah, and not everyone's got employment. Not everyone speaks English or other languages. It's very, very tough.
Did you end up going back? I mean, it's almost like you just kind of leave your stuff stranded there.
Yeah, we did. We waited until it calmed down a little bit, and then went back in for 6 weeks or so. So we had to pack up the apartment and wanted to see family.
Were you worried that you
weird.
would not be able to get out once going back in?
I wasn't too worried that we couldn't get out. It was just the level of difficulty to get back out. It was a bit worrying when we were there. So I did like a lot of nerdy analysis on the different military targets that would be close to us. We were unfortunately positioned right between the parliament and then the mayor's office. So I was like, that's kind of not good. But then I analyzed all of the different warheads that the Russians were using and then looked at the blast radius of all of the different types of ones. So I was like, all right, if they hit any of those, they're going to be like 300, 500 meters away from us. So then our windows will break. And I looked at the rate that windows would shatter. So I was like, windows would shatter, but then we'll be safe. It's like that, but that bit was a bit nerve-wracking.
It's not the analysis you want to do. I guess the analysis that you've done for e-commerce has paid off when you're trying to go into a war zone. You never thought you'd use it like that before.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I built a dashboard. Yeah, had to know that, but it gave enough confidence.
So, Mark, it's hard. I mean, most under normal conditions, it's not necessarily easy to run a business. How are you running the business during these type of conditions where you're traveling, you're kind of pushed out of your home and everything that was going on?
It is really hard because the weird bit is that you still have the same hours in the day. So from that perspective, it's still there. But then not having and just before it left, Nasser had built me like the best office ever. So I had my whiteboard, I had the desk, I had the monitors, and it's unbelievable. And like the amount you can get done when you have the right environment it's mind blowing. So then to have that, and you're on like a tiny table and you're just off the laptop, and then the Wi-Fi is dropping out, and then you've shifted time zones again, and then you've got to work out where all the local things are. It was really weird. And you feel like a bit of a failure because you know what you're capable of, but it's kind of like you got this incline uphill like that with weight strap. And then in the beginning, we didn't even know if the family was safe, and Dad was in a really hard situation. So trying to support from that side while trying to build things. It's a tough one.
Yeah. What do you do mentally during those times? Because like you said, it's not just the business. Now you're worried about everything else that's going on that puts things in perspective too.
Yeah, I think it's trying to like reduce things down to the minimum. So I'd shift my typical like goal setting to just be what are the three things that I need to do today that are just going to keep the business going? Just those three things. And then I use like Pomodoro timers, super helpful. So I always use that, but here it was just essential because like if I do 4 25-minute blocks in a day on the three most important things, it's often enough to just keep things rolling. So it's trying to get hyper focused.
Love it. I have one last question, Mark. First, before I ask it, thank you. Thanks for sharing the journey. It's pretty remarkable what you've done. And I want to point people to growth.shop and learn more about what Mark and the team are doing. Check out more episodes of the podcast as well. What's next, Mark, for Growth Shop?
It's all about the data. It's all about the numbers. So the focus of this year is, well, it's twofold. So it's extending out our platform so that people can get access to it, even if they're not a managed service client. So super excited for that. And then the next bit is on the Growth Shop Academy. So it's taking all the pieces that we've learned that companies, even if they're not at a level where it would economically make sense to be managed service, we still want to give people access to all of that information so that they can grow and get to the level where they'd be ready to jump in. So those two pieces are going to keep us pretty busy.
So people could do Growth Shop Academy. They could have access to the platform if they want to use it, or the managed services where you basically take care of everything for them.
Bingo.
Are there any other places online we should point people to, or is growth.shop the best place?
That's a good spot. Or you can just find me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to talk shop.
Is the platform piece, can people find that through the same site?
Not yet. That's still behind the scenes for the managed service people.
Yeah. So at some point it will show up magically on the site when it's ready for external people.
A little sparkly thing. Yeah, exactly, man.
Cool. Everyone go check out growth.shop. And Mark, thank you so much.
Right on. Pleasure, man.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like $100 grand.